Pucks with Haggs
is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 149th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. Thank you very much for listening. As always, we appreciate your listenership, your participation, and on days like today, your questions and you being able to interact with the show and ask me some questions that I will answer in another Mailbag episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. That's what you have in store today. Let's thank our sponsors, though, real quick, before we get into the Pucks with Haggs podcast. And we're going to get into Oliver Wahlstrom, picked up on waivers by the Boston Bruins from the New York Islanders on Saturday. And I should introduce myself. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. You can get all of my Bruins and NHL writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns 3 times a week for the Boston Sports Journal. There will certainly be one up on Sunday morning about the Bruins game against the Canucks and the Wahlstrom pickup. You may remember him as a kid from Maine that won the mini one-on-one. Must have been about almost 15 years ago now. Pretty good stuff there. But we will get to that in a minute. Let's thank Prize Picks first, though. Our friends at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's also take the guesswork out of getting any kind of tickets, concert tickets, movie tickets, maybe movie tickets, concert tickets, comedy tickets, sports tickets, all of that kind of good stuff at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? Game time. That's right. All right, let's get into it. Let's set, first of all, with where the Bruins are. They're 0-2 on their West Coast swing. They got absolutely smoked in Winnipeg. A horrible game. 5 unanswered goals in the third period. They basically collapsed without much opposition in the third period, aside from a couple of fights. They lost 5-1 in their last game against the Seattle Kraken, a team that's not in the playoff structure. Once again, they gave up 3 goals in the third period. It was a 2-1 game, and they got a third goal. Seattle did on a good bounce for them, fortunate bounce. And it really looked like at that point, once the Bruins were down 3-1 in the third period, they kind of set up camp and decided that was it. And this one was not going to be winnable either. They end up giving up 3 unanswered goals in the third period, lose 5-1. Some of that really don't like to see, obviously. The third period thing, they're now minus 15 for the season in the third period. They're one of the worst NHL teams in the third period, which is usually synonymous with being a bad team and not being in the playoffs if you're that poor in the third period. So some concern there with the way they finish games, that they don't have enough legs, that they can't keep pace with other teams, that they just run out of gas in the third period, that they sometimes, if the game is, if they're a few goals behind and maybe they don't feel like they have the offensive firepower to catch up, they kind of give up a little bit. They crack and break a little bit and really start giving up goals, which is not great to see either. That's a bad sign for a team. That is not a good character trait, or not character trait, not a good trait or identity trait for a team at all. And it does, there is an element of character and leadership and all of that stuff in not allowing that to happen. And that's a reflection sometimes. And some people want to paint it as a reflection of the talent level. And I don't think that's the case. Like, I don't, at a certain point, you just refuse to budge and refuse to crack. And you're going to keep a game exactly where it is. And you're not going to all of a sudden, lose your coverage, lose where your positioning, lose your philosophy, lose your composure and poise, lose all the things that allow you to really compete and keep things close. You don't lose that stuff unless there's, an element of allowing that to happen from a leadership, from a mental toughness perspective, from a makeup character perspective, all that stuff. So I think that's something they need to tighten up, and that's working on themselves and looking in the mirror as much as it's working on anything X's and O's on the practice ice. but they're also like struggling to score goals again on this road trip. They are, struggling against good teams. Just has not been good. They still have 3 games to go. I am going to reserve judgment, and I think I said this in the last podcast. I'm really going to reserve judgment on this team and what exactly they are until Christmas. I think they're a playoff team. I still think, unless they completely just nosedive, spiral out of control, collapse in the second half of the season, which I don't really see happening, I still think they're a playoff team. But it feels to me they're more like a wild card playoff team, and they're more like a team that's going to be out pretty quickly in the playoffs as constituted right now. And nothing I saw in Seattle made me change my mind in any way, shape, or form as far as that stuff goes. So we'll continue to watch and assess what's going on. But, knowing that the Bruins had a lot to prove on this road trip, knowing that this West Coast swing was going to be pretty important for them, and then seeing the way that they played in the first 2 games. And not only that, they lose 8-1. They get embarrassed in Winnipeg. You expect them to really straighten up in the second game against Seattle. And, the Bruins and Bruins teams of the past, Bruins teams of recent vintage, if they got blown out, if they got embarrassed by a team, you knew you were going to get their best the next time out. You knew they were going to be good. You knew they were going to be on point. You were going to get a good effort. You were going to see them doing the right things right out of the chute. You were going to see a lot of positive response and bounce back from the group and from the team. In that game against Seattle, you saw David Pastrnak take an offensive zone high sticking penalty, a kind of careless penalty, and it was like 20 seconds into the game. It was the first shift of the game. It wasn't even a minute into the game. It was totally unnecessary. It was like multiple attempts with the stick to just use stick work instead of actually like either getting the body in or really getting good position or moving your feet or any of that stuff. And it gets a double minor out of it. And then Tyler Johnson takes a penalty right after Seattle scores on one of the power plays, and then they kill off the other one. And then Tyler Johnson takes a tripping penalty right after that, and they go right back on the penalty kill. They basically were on the PK for the first 6 minutes of the game. That's a horrendous way to start a game after you got blown out 8-1 and embarrassed in the third period. And that is not the first time either this year that I've seen David Pastrnak take a penalty in the first shift of the game. He did it once earlier this year after the Bruins had made a big point out of discipline, out of not taking penalties, out of making it a focus, like of really talking about it. And the same thing, it was not in the defensive zone. It was, I think, in the neutral zone or close to the offensive zone. And it was literally the first 10 seconds of the game, and Pastrnak took a penalty. And he's done this multiple times now this year. And like, that is just, I'm sorry, that's not leadership. That is not leadership. That is not a player that's setting the example, that's showing the way, that's doing the right things to create the culture that's going to win, that's like on board for everything that's going on. It's just not. Like, I really like David Pastrnak as a person. I think he's a brilliant offensive player. I think he's a guy that can dominate at times with the way he plays, and certainly with the goal scoring. He may go down as the best pure goal scorer in the history of the Boston Bruins. But those kind of plays are bad. They're bad for the team. They're bad from a leadership perspective. They're bad from one of your best players. And there's too much of that from Pastrnak this year. There's too many plays like that where it's careless, where it's kind of lazy, where it looks almost disengaged at times. And it certainly doesn't look like the kind of player that you want setting the tone for everybody else on that team and organizationally. And it's a fine line to walk with Pasta, because he's a hugely talented player. He's somebody that on a team like the Bruins, where they are struggling to score, you're going to need David Pastrnak, and you're going to need him because he's your best source of offense and because he can make so many things happen. And I'm sure on some level, Pastrnak in some of this stuff is also guilty more than anything else of trying to do too much, because he feels the pressure also of trying to score, of trying to make things happen offensively, of maximizing every shift, of, doing his part, like, and all that. And I think that is certainly a part of what we're seeing here. But sometimes with him, when he feels that way or he feels that pressure, it turns into a really counterproductive thing that we're seeing on the ice. And that was what we saw at the beginning of that game against Seattle. It was just the exact opposite of how you want to start a game, coming off a game where you got humbled and embarrassed and humiliated in Winnipeg against a good team. So just not a lot to like, obviously, about the Thursday night game against Seattle. Saturday night, they will be going into Vancouver, which could be another tough one. Should be interesting with guys like Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov going back to where they used to play, and Danton Heinen and Jake DeBrusk being there. The really interesting things that it will play into as far as that game goes. All right, let's move on from where we are with the Bruins right now. They're still in a playoff spot. I believe they're still in the third spot in the Atlantic Division, so they're still in a pretty decent place. And they were there at Thanksgiving, so I still think they're in an okay place. But I think we're seeing a team with a lot of flaws that is going to be really up and down and is not going to be as consistent as they've been in the past. And that speaks to, not a great thing, not high hopes for the playoffs and not a great thing, great expectations for the postseason for this team right now. All right, let's move on to the big news for the weekend. Oliver Wahlstrom, former first-round pick. I think he was a first-round pick in 2018 by the New York Islanders, 11th overall, I believe. Picked up on waivers by the Boston Bruins today. That means the Wahlstrom was put on waivers on Friday. Teams had 24 hours to take him. He obviously got through a lot of the waiver process because the Bruins are in a playoff spot, so they're pretty high up. And they took Wahlstrom, the Bruins did, with their spot in the waiver wire. So he will now be a member of the Boston Bruins. I don't know how quickly he's going to be able to get to Vancouver. That could be somewhat challenging just because of, getting flights to Canada, across the country, like all that stuff. But I think this is a really interesting pickup by the Bruins. I think, there's some potential there. Obviously, as a former first-round pick, and we all know him as a kid that grew up in Maine, that did the mini one-on-one. I think it was 2011. It was a while ago. I know that. And did like a lacrosse style goal. He picked the puck up on his stick, did a spinorama, and then fired it almost lacrosse style to score. And it made highlight reels all over the country. It definitely, was memorable as far as the mini one-on-one goes, when they still did the sort of shootout style mini one-on-one, which they don't do anymore. Now it's a 3-on-3 game for 3 minutes, and it's like a tournament, which I think it's actually the way Mass Hockey and the Bruins do it now, I think is great because it involves more kids. It's more sort of the small area game, team-oriented play than the sort of individualistic shootout thing that they used to do. But that's neither here nor there. And by the way, it's that is going on, I think, soon at the Garden, too, within the next week or two, the championships for the mini one-on-one. District 9, which is where Newton is, we took part in it a week or so ago in Waltham for our district. It was phenomenal. Most teams ever in District 9 participating. So it was teams like Winchester, Newton, Lexington, Bedford, Watertown, Waltham, Belmont, Billerica, I believe, was there, Arlington. So a lot of sort of heavy hitters and traditional hockey towns were involved. And it was great. Extremely well run every year. It's a great event. It's something the kids look forward to and get really excited about. And they do a great job, and it's totally put on by Mass Hockey and the Boston Bruins. So shout out to them for continuing to do the mini one-on-one. It's one of the best things going as far as youth hockey goes in Massachusetts and New England. And if you're not involved, if your association isn't involved, ask your district rep. Talk to your association people, the people on your board in your town. Ask the district rep, when's the district mini one-on-one tournament? How can you get involved? Because if you're not involved right now with your town at the squirt and peewee level for both boys and girls, you need to be, because there's no reason not to do it. It's a fantastic, phenomenal event. And if you win the districts, the kids get to go play at the Garden. And if they win that, they get a huge trophy, and the squirts get to go to NHL All-Star Weekend. So it's pretty unbelievable, and it's a great thing. and it's one of the great parts of being in youth hockey in Massachusetts. And it's one of the great things that Massachusetts hockey does. So get involved if you're not doing it right now. I highly recommend it. We've done it the last 2 years in Newton, and it's been awesome. All right, so getting back to Oliver Wahlstrom, that's where he first popped up on everybody's radars, was with the mini one-on-one. But now the Bruins are taking him on waivers. Had a year at Boston College, was at the U.S. national team for a few years, but has had like an interesting career. He's one of those players that's super duper talented, I think, offensively skilled, but it never translated with the Islanders into huge seasons. I think the most he's scored in any of his pro seasons is like 13 goals and 24 points or something like that. And that was like 4 or 5 years ago with the Islanders. He was never really down in the AHL. There was one season he was down there. Otherwise, he's been with the Islanders. He's been in and out of the lineup. He's had 1 or 2 years where he played pretty regularly, but for the most part has been in and out and been sort of like a 13th forward for the Islanders, but been on their roster. And it finally got to the point where the last couple of years, he hasn't even really put up offensive numbers. He's just had a couple of goals in each season, hasn't played that often. And maybe it seems to me that maybe a change of scenery was in store for him. And we're still talking about a 24, 25-year-old kid. So still very young, still a kid that can potentially go to a different locale and really catch on. I think given his skill, given his offensive level, if the Bruins can play him with some of their better players and just let him go and give him a chance to establish himself, maybe they can find something there. I think the talent is obviously there, and the Islanders tend to have in years past and traditionally, but run a kind of conservative outfit as far as what they do to create offense. So maybe that has put some wraps on Wahlstrom, and maybe playing in that system and playing with some of those players and coming up through that system didn't allow him to flourish offensively, and maybe going somewhere else would do that. It's going to be really interesting to see, but I also think this is a no-brainer for the Bruins to at least try with a player like this, especially a guy that's got a New England background, that's got some history as far as being involved with the mini one-on-one. So he's been on Nesson before, and he's a known quantity around here because he played in Hockey East and because of the mini one-on-one. So that adds to it as well. I think that makes it a nice fit. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to have to show that he can produce offensively. They're going to bring him in here not for his great two-way play, not for really anything aside from the offensive talent that he has, and seeing if that can translate into goals and points and making plays. For a Bruins team that needs some help there, it doesn't have enough high-end offensive players that can do that. And, maybe this lights a fire under some players too for the Bruins. This gives competition to guys like Justin Brazeau, to guys like Trent Frederick, to guys like Morgan Geekie. He's going to compete with them for a spot, and he's going to push all of those players. And there's going to be somebody good now that's sitting as a forward if and when he comes in. And that should bring the best out of some of these other players, and that will give Joe Sacco kind of a hammer to wield if he's not getting the level best out of them, and he's not getting full maximum effort from some of these forwards. Then Wahlstrom's going to be able to come in, and I'm hoping the kid has a nice fit here. Like I've always been intrigued by him. He's had some pretty good games against the Bruins as a member of the Islanders, but he has not been able to put it together over the course of a full season at the NHL level, but he's still young enough that I think there's something there. So I would like to see what he can do with the Bruins. So I think this is a great pickup, but I'm really going to be interested to see what he can bring to the table as a former first-round pick. So good job, Don Sweeney and Bruins management, for snagging Oliver Wahlstrom. Now let's see what he can do. As for right now, let's take a break from the podcast action, and let's give you a few words about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun, and it's pretty simple. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this hockey season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. That's right, Picksmas. I said it. This week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at the hockey board and selecting Nikita Zadorov for over 2.5 hits. I think that's a pretty safe one. Sidney Crosby for over 12.5 face-off wins against Ottawa, and Brandon Montour for over 23 minutes of ice time. Make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. Prize Picks now offers MasterCard as well for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right. Let's get into some of the questions. This is from Matt Lombo 24. And this goes right back to Oliver Wahlstrom. Any chance Oliver Wahlstrom is super talented and needed a change of scenery, or is just another grinder for depth? I think that's a great question, Matt. He's not a grinder. Let's get that out of the way right quick. This is not a grinder type pickup. I don't think there's any reason the Bruins would pick up a grinder on waivers. Like, that is not, they don't need more bottom six, fourth line kind of guys. I think they have plenty of those, both at the NHL level and in Providence. This is a player that has offensive upside. This is a player that can put the puck in the net, that can create, that has great skill, that has something that some of those other Bruins players don't. Now, it has, as I said before, has not translated at the NHL level adequately. He's never had a 20-goal season. He's never had a big offensive season. He's never even been able to consistently push to stay in the lineup aside from a year or two on a night-in, night-out basis. It seems like he's always been caught up in a numbers game and has never been able to really establish himself, certainly not as a top six guy at the NHL level. And, the Islanders gave him plenty of chances, certainly, because they invested a first-round pick on him, and they wanted to see him hit, and they wanted to see their return on their investment, and they didn't. But I think there's a chance that he's definitely talented. We've all seen the skill. And he was a first-round pick. Like, you're not a first-round pick by accident. But he was a fantastic player when he was young, and he was really on a lot of people's radars because he had great skill. And maybe some of that has caught up, but we're still talking about a kid that's 6'2", over 200 pounds, has good size, has good skill level, played at Boston College and did pretty well there. So, we're talking about a guy that's had a little bit of track record here. The one thing that has been tough about him, and maybe it's a little bit of a cautionary tale, and maybe it was a little bit of a mistake by the Islanders, is it seemed like he was a young player that in his early 20s never got to play for a long period of time. He had a decent stretch 1 year in the AHL where he played a lot. He had at least 1 year in the NHL where he played over 70 games. But I don't think he was in the lineup enough as a young player consistently to really develop his game. He looks to me like a player that probably should have spent more time in the AHL, really developing his confidence, playing in all situations, developing his game, and getting to the point where he could be a finished product at the NHL level. Instead, it seems like they had him in the NHL, he bounced him in and out of the lineup, didn't do the best things for him developmentally, and that maybe has ended up being a problem for him and being an issue and part of the reason that he struggled to establish himself. So I think some of the onus for this might be on the Islanders and the way that they utilized him. And this is why with a guy like Matt Patra, I think most people should be on board, and certainly I am, with him being in Providence right now. I think he's got 5 goals in 5 straight games for the Providence Bruins, and he's really caught fire, and he's really gaining his confidence offensively, sort of finding his mojo. and getting his game to where you want it to be, so he can be ready to contribute when he comes back to the NHL level. But like Patra playing a third line role where he's playing 10, 11 minutes a night and sometimes a healthy scratch, sometimes in at the NHL level, like that doesn't do a young player, a guy in his early 20s, any favors. You're not helping a player like that become the best that they can be in that kind of a scenario, in that kind of a situation. And I think that's honestly what Wahlstrom found himself in a lot, that situation with the Islanders. And I don't think it was good for him. And I think we've seen that now. With the way things panned out. Now, like maybe he's a first-round bust. Maybe he's never going to establish himself anywhere. Maybe he just becomes one of those cautionary tale players that never quite made it, despite really a lot of early flash. That could also be as well. But I think when you think about a guy like Patra, I think Wahlstrom is a good guy to look at and say maybe the Islanders didn't do right by him with his development in his early 20s, and that's why we see him struggling and now being waived at this point in his career in his mid-20s, where you kind of really start to need to be a finished product of the NHL. And he's going to be hitting free agency soon, I think, by his service time. And the Islanders just, had enough, and we're going to send him down to the AHL at this point, which is too late. So we'll see, but he's super talented, not a grinder, and the Bruins, maybe they've found something here. That would be a tremendous story if they did. All right, this is from Sausage King 75. I'm glad I'm not alone with David Pastrnak. His play is lazy, and it shows through that he was getting covered by Bergeron and others when he turned the puck over in the past. Quote, something's wrong with Pastrnak, unquote, might be the most common excuse I see online. If he's hurt, then let him sit and get better. And that's from Sausage King 75. I don't think that Pastrnak is hurt. It seems like there is always the questions when he struggles of, is he hurt? Is something wrong with him? And some people have said that he's not extending for pucks, that he's not, that in certain situations, it looks like he's trying to like protect himself instead of like going full out. There's a reluctance to shoot the puck at times. There's certainly a few things going on where you wonder if something is going on. And I can understand the evidence behind that or the thought behind that. But I also think that I don't think there's anything wrong with him. I think he was not in shape in training camp, played himself into shape at the start of the season, which lent itself to some really bad habits and bad things happening at the beginning of the year. And, now he's kind of gotten himself into a little bit better place, but he's still making mistakes. He's still doing a lot of things where, yes, I do agree. I think playing with Bergeron and Marchand covered a lot of his flaws and was really good for him and protected him to a certain degree. And now that he doesn't have that, some of those flaws are becoming much more apparent, more right in your face, more problematic, leading to issues, leading to goals against, leading to turnovers, leading to all that stuff. And it allows him to get exposed a little bit more when he needs to kind of drive the line. And I think that was some of the thinking behind bringing in a guy like Elias Lindholm, is that he was a Bergeron-like presence that maybe could cover for some of that stuff with Pastrnak. But they have not had great chemistry. It seems like Pastrnak really wants to play with Pavel Zacha as his center, and maybe that's part of this as well. But I do wonder how good the Bruins can be if they really if the puck is on Pasternak's stick a lot, given some of the negative plays that sometimes happen with him. And it's tough too, because in the same breath that you see like the game that I talked about where he took the penalty in the first shift against Seattle, there were also games like a week or two ago where he was setting up Pavel Zacha in overtime for game winners. And, I think you look at all that stuff and you say, do you just have to take the good with the bad with Pastrnak? Is there a certain point where you say, we just can't handle the bad anymore? And we need to scale back on how much he has the puck and sort of what he's doing. But then I think you take away his effectiveness when you do that. It's a really difficult spot to be in. I think the best thing you can do is what they tried to do, which was put a player like Lindholm with him that can protect him a little bit. But you're also talking then about like taking away from his offense because he's constantly going to be looking to cover, for his teammates. And that becomes a complicated situation. But I don't think he's hurt. I do think he struggles a little bit, and we'll see what happens moving forward. But like I'm sure Pastrnak is hearing some of this criticism right now, and there are times he needs to be better. Like I think he's on a pace for like 80 or 90 penalty minutes. That one needs to change. Like way too many offensive zone penalties, way too penalties that have nothing to do with like saving a goal, way too many penalties that are stick work, not moving your feet, kind of lazy. Like all that stuff needs to change. Needs to be much better than it is right now. One thing that doesn't need to be better? Us taking a break from the podcast to give Game Time some love. That's right. Nothing could be better than Game Time and talking about Game Time. So let's do that. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time for obviously your Bruins tickets, but also if you're looking for tickets for the Patriots, Celtics, or even comedy or concert tickets as well. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite team play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The game of the week for this week is the December 21st showdown between the Bruins and the Sabres of the Garden right ahead of Christmas. The super deal is $209 for loge seats, which is pretty great value for Bruins tickets, and that is no lie. Priority Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. All-in pricing is a feature that allows you to toggle and shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views, get a panoramic seat view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's right, 110%. What is better than that? Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. If that all sounds good to you, then you should download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? Game time. Game time. Yes, that's right. Game time. All right. Let us get one more question in here. Elias Lindholm needs to be put down like a Walking Dead zombie. This is going to go down as the worst contract in Boston Bruins history, and that is from Mike Sylvie on the Facebook fan page. Mike, I think you're going a little too far. I like Elias Lindholm. He seems like a nice guy. He has a family, so we're not going to talk about him being a Walking Dead zombie. I like him as a player. I obviously the contract is not good with the offensive production right now. He's on pace for like 9 goals and 30 points, 8 goals and 29 points, something like that this season. There's been times where the centers for the Bruins have been dominated by the centers on the other team, like that blowout loss to Winnipeg. Mark Scheifele was all over it and just dominant and was having his way with Lindholm and that line when they were out on the ice. He has not been good offensively. He's been barely a presence offensively. And that is a problem. And he does not have the puck on his stick a lot. He's not a traditional center as far as a line driving center. He's more of a complementary center. He's a guy, though, like I like his defense. I like his two-way play. I like his hustle. I like his physicality. I think there's a lot of things that he does well. That you have to do well playing the center position if you want to be effective on a playoff team. But the one biggie for me is that he is just like not ready when the puck gets to him in the offensive zone. He's unable to shoot. He's unable to cleanly handle the puck. He's unable to get off good scoring chances in areas where his teammates are setting him up for great chances. Like he has really struggled offensively. And some of it to me looks like he's still getting used to playing with players on his team and the chemistry there. And they're not on the same page right now. That's what it seems like to me. And some of that is understandable. You would think an elite player, an elite center in the world would not take very long to warm up to teammates, to get used to certain situations, to expect passes in certain situations, to be ready to finish when he gets the puck around the net. Like all that different stuff that hasn't been there. But perhaps Elias Lindholm is a guy that takes a little while to warm up, that takes a little while to get going, that takes a little while to get comfortable and for you to see your best out of him. Maybe he's that kind of a player. And I think you have to hold out some hope still just like 30 or so games into the season, that at the halfway mark or in the second half of the year, there's a better player in there that we haven't seen yet. I just have to believe that there's a better player in there than what we've seen. And we had some players. I know we were talking to Mark Diver earlier this week on the podcast, and he mentioned maybe this guy is over the hill. Maybe his best days are behind him, and he's just hitting the wall. And I mean, God, maybe, but that's a bad scenario for the Bruins if that's what's going on right now. And I have to think at 28, 29 years old, that's not quite what we're seeing yet. He still has gas left in the tank, and it's just that he has not gotten a comfortable yet and fully up to speed on what he's doing with this team in this new environment. I mean, let's face it. He struggled with Vancouver when he first got there, and he struggled for a while, basically the second half of the year from the time he got there. But then he caught fire in the playoffs and really played well. Maybe that's something that happens here. Maybe, a month from now, all of a sudden he's catching fire offensively. He's playing well with his line mates. He's playing well as a bumper on the power play. He's showing stuff that we haven't seen before. And he's just a better player than what we're seeing right now. Maybe all of that is going to come to fruition for him, and maybe we're being a little impatient. And I want to keep that in mind, because I'm not ready to make grand pronouncements about this being the worst contract in Bruins history, or really slamming Don Sweeney for a bad contract and a bad signing based on a couple of months. Like, I think Zadorov has been okay. He struggled too at the beginning, and I think he's kind of showed what he can do. And I think he's shown enough now to see that he's going to be an asset during the playoffs. He's going to be a dirty, mean, and nasty SOB around the net. And he's going to bring a little attitude and intimidation to the Bruins that they really sorely needed on the back end. So even with the penalties and some of the mistakes he makes with the puck, I can see it with Zadorov. He's going to help. I haven't seen it yet with Lindholm, but I'm going to still give him some time to show me. And I think everybody should show some patience with him, just in case he's one of those guys that needs a little extra time, that needs a long runway to get comfortable, that needs a little extra reps and timing to get it down with his teammates and to show what he can do offensively. Because I think he's better than this. He has to be better than this. He can't have had multiple 20-goal seasons in the NHL. He can't have had a 40-goal, 80-point season in the NHL based on what we're seeing right now. Maybe his confidence is really low too. Maybe he's one of those guys, when you put him in a new situation, there's a little anxiety there, and he needs to work through that and get into his comfort zone. Like, maybe all this stuff is going on. It's really hard to say. Seems like kind of a quiet guy. Doesn't seem like the life of the party in the locker room at all. So maybe he's just kind of a quiet guy that goes through these periods of doubt, self-doubt about his game, and has these ebbs in confidence. It's hard to say right now. But I think it's prudent to give a guy like that some time before we jump on his back and, really start making grand pronouncements about how good or bad the contract was. So good questions this week, guys. Thank you very much for participating. Let's thank our sponsors again. Prize Picks, download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's also take the guesswork out of buying any kind of tickets with Game Time, our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? Game time. That's right, Game Time. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll be back to the regular podcast with guests next week. The Bruins will be taking on the Vancouver Canucks on Saturday night. That should be interesting. But for the time being, I am signing off from here at Jay Peak in Vermont, where my son has a hockey tournament. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the rink.